Hello.
No, the sound is there. It's fine. Welcome,
You all
my
right?
friend. Welcome. Yes, good. Looking
Hello,
forward to
everyone.
this one.
Yeah, me too.
It's almost as if somebody arranged a neat little protest involving some horses for us to discuss that very subject. And what else horses are used for within the police? How do you fancy
Did
that?
something, why did something happen last night then, Harry, did it?
I was just looking at my laptop on my lap and I was just giggling to myself. Look, because
Oh, it's
let's face
hilarious.
it,
Did you have that link before I sent it to you? I mean, if you didn't, what a great link for me to have said. I mean, it just played out
oh,
on everything we needed
no.
to know is on that link.
That link was great. For
It
everyone
was
here,
hilarious.
welcome everyone. We're up to 101 already,
Hello.
so lovely. Welcome everyone. There was a link that Dave shared me, and it was a young lad. And to be honest, he's a nice enough lad. He's just naive, you know. He just thinks that now's the time in this massive melee of protest to have a little chat and a discussion with the police, and then he'll win them all round because he's in his niceness. And so you can't dislike naiveness, but the naivety even is a word. But anyway, he was he was getting a little bit close and a bit coming, and a police officer.
Well, he
Go on.
was struggling for accommodation, wasn't he? Until that
He
moment.
was. He did say a couple of times, "I might need to get a hotel room tonight," because he didn't live in Bristol. But he had obviously had quite a lot of high. Quite expensive, powerful equipment on him, lots of battery recharges. So he'd been doing a live stream for 7 hours, hadn't he, Dave?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
uh, and,
He's been
and
very
and
busy.
basically he got some great footage, I'll have to admit. And the trouble is, he made a few comments which just showed his naivety, really. And I mean, at the end of the day, no protest got badly injured or damaged. I was going to say badly injured or injured, to say the least. But which just shows how restrained the policing is. Is that policing doesn't look pretty. It doesn't look pretty when you got to the protest stage with dogs, horses, shields, and you don't move. You're sort of asking for it. And yet, in this country, quite rightly, we don't need to go in hitting heads with sticks like in some other countries, do we, Dave?
No,
That's all I'll
that's
say.
it. You know, and we're gonna be talking to John in a little while, and you know, there's two ends of the spectrum of policing. Certainly, with what I do with dogs
Savage,
like him,
savage hound. Don't
is
touch him, Dave. He could have your
oh,
arm off.
such a vicious, nasty dog. And the animals that John used to work with, you know, you got two complete opposite ends of the spectrum where, you know, you are doing the engagement and the shows and the stuff like that and letting people see these dogs and breaking down barriers. And then the other end of the spectrum is the stuff that, you know, you quite rightly said, no one wants to deal with and certainly no one wants to see. And that's when things, I wouldn't even say things go wrong because nothing really went wrong last night policing
No,
wise other than the fact that the people who were told to go home didn't listen, and then the law has to be upkept at some point.
I'm being heckled already, Dave.
Ah, yeah, good, well done, Maria, well done. I'm glad you said it. It needed saying.
That's just that right. You're quite right, Dave. You're quite right. I am hoping that when we bring John Taylor. So John Taylor is he was extremely. So it didn't actually start in the Met. It started in Thames Valley, but it was in the army before that. And I just want to ask him where his horse interests came in initially, whether it was in the army and that side of things. He was Thames Valley. Became sergeant, CID, I think, and then he moved to Met. Got demoted to the Met. No, I'm joking. I'm
Yeah.
joking. All right, God, Jesus. And then so he goes to the Met, where it's all his horses became his life, and now he works for the Horses Trust. So we want to ask him about Horses Trust as well. It's nice to know what happens to horses after they've done such service. I do hope he's got a horse on his sofa like you have.
Yeah. If he hasn't,
So
we'll have to kick him back out until he goes and gets one.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting questions that I've been sent, and I've been asked as well about using animals in policing. So we'll put those to John as well. And yeah, let's just talk a little bit about, without giving any trade secrets away, their
yeah.
training, how these animals behave, and how they see a scenario like last night. I can't wait. This is brilliant. We could probably talk about 3 or 4 hours about this stuff and still not hit it all.
Yeah, exactly. I just wanted to mention a little shout out. Greater Manchester Police had a very sad loss this week. Federation are devastated at the report of the death of colleague DC Kwamazaman. Please excuse my pronunciation. Quamar, Quamar. Quamar was an exceptionally popular officer who will be missed by all who knew and worked with him. Our thoughts are with the family and friends and close colleagues. So that's a real tragic one, that one. I just wanted to mention him. You know, when they put he was exceptionally popular, you know they were that little character who just popped up above the rest, don't they, when they say that sort of thing? Which I'm sure John was as well, and still is. So should we bring him on?
Yeah, let's do this.
Should we do it? Let's do it. John Taylor, welcome. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm looking forward to this afternoon.
And you've got your jockey colours on, I see, as well, in your shirt.
I'm sorry, no, this is just M&S. I thought I'd put a shirt and tie on. That would have been quite mounted branch, to be fair.
Can you spin the camera around and show us the horse sitting on the sofa for us?
Well, I haven't got a horse, but I've got my work boots just outside that door, which has got a little bit of horse on it.
Yeah, Dave, I hope you haven't got a bit of dog on yours.
No, but I'm notorious for bagging some dog poo and going on to something else and just sticking it in a combat trouser pocket, and then an hour or so later thinking, what's that smell?
Yeah. That's no good. See, I love the smell of horse poo, I must admit. But I think it's the meat, isn't it, in dogs? It's the meat that smells so terrible.
I want to know why I have to go around and bag my animals' poo up. John doesn't have to go around and bag his up when he's on duty.
His reminds us of the country.
That's quite a common question. People ask that frequently when you're on patrol, and obviously the main reason is that horse poo isn't dangerous.
Yeah.
It drops down and it doesn't carry the same sort of diseases as dog poo does. But actually, interestingly, the Met Mounted branch in central London have an agreement with Westminster, and if the horses poo in inconvenient spots, like the little narrow passageways in Soho and places like that, you just call up and the street cleaners will come and remove it for us. So
fantastic.
It doesn't affect people, wheelchair users and people like that might run over it and get it on their wheels. We get it tidied up. So it is it's a thing.
Yeah.
I like it. I like the smell of it.
I didn't know that.
I like cow poo as well, but then that country boy, see? That's what it is.
Harry, I think that's called a fecophiliac. You are officially a fecophiliac.
Is it? I'm definitely vegetarian poo smeller. I don't like meat eaters poo smellers or omnivores. Should we move this on? We've learned something already, though, from Dave.
A completely different discussion for a completely different show, I'm sure.
So tell me, John. Did you start off in the military, and not only just were you jumping out of planes in parachutes and things?
I was.
Have I made that up? No,
you haven't made it up. But I did work with horses when I initially left school. So when I left school in 1981, millions of years ago.
Cars.
I worked on a 3-day event yard, and also in a show jumping yard. And I'd wanted to become a farrier.
Right.
Some people would normally call a blacksmith, but a person who choose horses. And I'd initially gone into the army with the idea of perhaps joining the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery or the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment.
Yeah.
With a view to seeking an apprenticeship as a farrier.
Blimey.
But I enjoyed the soldiering. In my basic training, I actually really enjoyed the running around and the thunder flashes and all the other bits and pieces. So my life took a little change of direction at that point. And I did end up eventually in 29 Commando Regiment. So, yes, I was jumping out of planes and landing on beaches in...
Are these literally the red berets? Once.
No, heavens, no. No, these are green berets.
Oh, right, okay.
These are green berets, yes.
Harry, you're going to start a fire, mate.
I was a forward observer. So there was a requirement for me to be parachute trained as well. And I actually did the parachute selection course as well as the parachuting course. So I actually would be entitled to wear a red beret as well if I had chosen to.
Wow.
Okay, I think
But you say you were a spotter. Was your job was to tell them when to jump, was it?
No. My job was to direct the fire of artillery and naval gunfire.
Right, got you.
So
that's heavy stuff. And you spent a bit of time in Iraq, didn't you? Then.
Yes, I did, but that was more humanitarian work. In 91, when the Kurds had retreated into the mountains in northern Iraq, 3 Commando Brigade was deployed in order to sort of reclaim what is now known as Kurdistan, northern Iraq, and secure it so the Kurds could leave the refugee camps and return to their homes safely.
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Incredible.
Can I just say, just on the side, some of the comments, Jem is not forgiving me for saying last week that she looked like a 12-year-old boy. But there is a story behind that. But Jem is a very good friend of mine, and so sorry about that. They're having an argument on the side. I had to.
She's a Met officer, so we can say what we like.
Yeah, she is a Met officer. So then you decided to join the police, and it was Thames Valley, wasn't it? And had you been sort of separated from horses at this point for a certain bit, or?
Yeah, no, absolutely. When I made the decision to kind of go down the soldiering route, exclusively rather than the soldiering and horse route, I'd not forgotten about horses. I think once they get into the system, they're there forever. But I'd pretty much sort of decided that wasn't going to be my career anymore, and I looked for other, ways of earning my money. So I joined the Thames Valley Police and had a really, really good time in the TVP. I really enjoyed it. I did numerous bits and pieces. I worked in CID for a while in a proactive unit. I was a tutor constable, which I really enjoyed. And then I got into neighbourhood policing. And I really enjoyed having my own beat, my little fiefdom that I had sort of control over and was able to manage myself.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound too corny about it, but one of the things that I think had taken me into the Met was after the horrendous 7/7 bombings. Up until that point, I had a real feeling and a sense of loyalty towards policing the area that I lived in. But I think that atrocious act had made me realise that actually there was a lot of merit in policing your country's capital city. And that sort of parochial feeling of loyalty to policing the town I lived in kind of extended out to London and our capital, if you like. And eventually I kind of came to the conclusion and made that decision to move across to London. And I guess the rest is history.
So how long had you been a copper before you transferred to the Met?
Well, I left the army 92. I joined the Thames Valley Police, June 92. So I'd been in 16 years or so, I think.
Oh, blimey.
I had to sit down and work it out in the Thames Valley before transferring over.
Wow, and that's quite a long time. I mean, that's proper feet under the table, know the ins and outs of the force and how it all works, and then you change it up again.
Completely change.
Yeah.
How lovely you can use that experience and now bring it into your hobby as such, if you like. Well,
I mean, what had happened was that I'd been posted to Charing Cross, to CX. And while I was there for 2 years on response, I was coming into contact a lot with the mounted branch.
Did that reignite everything, did it?
Well, CX, if you like. CX, Charing Cross. They're responsible for for the police and the Queen's Lifeguard. And those are both events that are policed by the mounted units. So I was coming into contact with them, and I also was a PSU commander, so I was shield trained, and so I was coming into contact a lot more with the horses at sporting events and public order and things like that. And I got talking.
Where's the Nick at Charing Cross?
Sorry?
Where's the Nick at Charing Cross?
William IV Street, behind Edith Cavell.
Okay, so you're not far away from old, what's it called? Great Scotland Yard Stable.
Great Scotland Yard, yeah, indeed. And it was the guys from Great Scotland Yard that I started to talk to and had built a little bit of a friendship and rapport with, and just happened to mention to them actually one day that, well, I used to work with horses. By this time I was a sergeant, and one of the mounted branch sergeants said, well, we've got some sergeants' vacancies coming up. We've got 2 sergeants' vacancies coming up. So, I came home and booked a riding lesson at a local riding school to see if I could still do it. And just like, I guess, like riding a bike, really, I just felt.
Wow. I bet you were like a kid in a sweet shop, weren't you? I remember the times I got to go and play with the dogs before I got onto the dog section. You know, just just incredible.
Well, so after I'd done the application, I was teased a little bit by my CX colleagues because I would like be checking the emails at 3 a.m. to see if I'd been successful with my board application. Like, John, you only check them at midnight. Nobody's going to be sending you an email at 2 o'clock in the morning to telling you if you'd passed or not.
Yeah. So you're in, right? So you actually get in. What was your role generally in a year of mounted policing? What were the sort of different aspects that you'd be used for?
You've talked about public order issues briefly, and that makes up a surprisingly small amount of the day-to-day policing on horseback. In 2015, the RAND organisation and the University of Oxford published a report on mounted policing, and they'd kind of corroborated what mounted officers have been saying for years about the value of horses, but nobody had done any kind of academic study and produced any hard evidence for it. It was all speculation, if you like. One of the things that they discovered was that mounted officers have, on average, 6 times more casual contacts with the public than foot patrols or other police patrols.
Yeah.
Because horses are people magnets, and they'll come over and speak to you, and they'll engage with you. So a big part of it, across the country, about 60 to 70% of it is neighbourhood policing, or what they call. I seem to have echo only when the photos come up.
It seems to be a problem only when. So I put them on quite quickly. And tell you what, I'll just put the photographs up and you just see if it's the same with me, Dave. Is it echoes slightly when I put the photo up? Or is that fine? Okay, so it might be the question, something's happening there, which I don't know. But so we'll put the photographs up when one of us talk, and then I'll bring it back, because that's a lovely bit of neighbourhood policing, if you like, there, isn't it?
There's a little crossover there between ceremonial duties and neighbourhood. That's actually the front of Buckingham Palace. The neighbourhood side of it, for those of you that are familiar with the Met, or just a brief explanation for those that aren't, they come through to mounted branch through taskings. So collectively, once in a while, everyone gets together, all the DIs and the borough commanders, and they look at their crime problems and they decide which centrally owned resources are going to be directed to which borough to deal with which problem.
Right.
Obviously, there's ongoing issues in Westminster with pickpocketing and the type of things that you'd find in any major city. But things like burglary dwelling houses, for example, we were tasked with dealing with some burglary dwelling issues in Paddington. And with a little bit of thought, we decided we'd do late term patrols, and we would try and capture people, potential victims, when they're coming off the transport hubs to go home and in the streets where they live. So we took a load of burglary crime reduction literature with us, and we literally rode down the street, stood there and waited for people to come out their houses to talk to us.
Fantastic.
We were able to tell them that they were living in a burglary hotspot area, and had they considered the appropriate protection measures for their properties, and give them the necessary literature, etc. So
way more engaging and way more successful, and way higher hit rate than someone or a PCSO or a couple of bobbies walking down the street handing out leaflets. Amazing.
Now, the beauty, of course, is that they come to you.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait very long before you have a little crowd around you.
Yeah.
Very true. What I want to do, and we're going to come back to the other side of things, but the public order side of things, and people are desperate to ask you certain questions about police horses and the fireworks situation. I'm going to show a little bit of video of events that have occurred in the last sort of week, really. So first of all, let's put this one on. We'll bring this one on and play this one a minute. So this was last week, and you can see horses being used to great effect there. They're like a wall, aren't they? And you'll see very later on about the fireworks going on. And we can ask you a few questions about that. The horses are top left-hand corner there. So yeah. Oops, okay.
So, John, a lot of questions, as I said before you came out the green room, I've had a lot of questions on Finn's social media and through private messages saying, how do you get the horses used to that? Is it fair? Should we be using animals in situations like that? I'm just going to briefly answer from a dog point of view. So that obviously it's never nice to see a firework going off near a dog, but actually those dogs are taught to see gunfire as an exciting stimulus, and actually that it might mean that someone's got a gun and someone might need dealing with, and we desensitize them to the noise so it's not shocking for them. And actually, anybody who saw the close-up of those dogs with that firework, none of the dogs reacted. So how is it done with horses? How is that sort of situation for you when you're on horseback?
Obviously, the main difference from a behavioural point of view from a horse and a dog is that horses are flight animals.
Yeah.
Whereas a dog would be more inclined to stand their ground and fight out of fear and adversity. A horse's reaction is to flee.
Yeah.
That's where they're naturally inclined to do. So there is a little bit of desensitization. Certainly when I left, horses attended the public order training centre a minimum of twice a year, where they would be exposed to loud noises, petrol bombs, and they would be in a controlled environment exposed to the type of things that you would expect to have in a large-scale disorder in the centre of the town.
Yeah.
What you tend to find with fireworks is that it's very difficult to desensitize a horse to firework because they're such a very loud noise that's over very, very quickly. Things like fire, you can, because it burns away and they can go and have a look at it and they can get used to it. A firework happens, bang, it's done. So what you'll often find with the horses is there may be an immediate reaction to a firework. To a competent rider, probably no more than a twitch, but certainly they're likely to jump and think, what's that? And as soon as they've been exposed to 2 or 3, then they'll settle into that. We also use the horse's herd instincts.
Yeah.
So you get weak horses and strong horses, brave horses, not so brave horses. So when a sergeant decides which serial he's going to use on any particular event, a lot of consideration will be given to the nature of the horses on that event. And you will normally have a braver horse with a slightly less braver horse. And the less brave horse will take some strength and courage from his strong companion. And by doing this, you actually form a very cohesive unit where a horse is not likely to want to break away. They want to stay with the herd, and you don't lose that effectiveness as working together.
That makes sense. Is there a limit then? Go on, Dave.
No, I was going to say, I think you know the horse. A friend of mine works out of GSY, Great Scotland Yard, and he quite often rides Merlin, which, you know, is one of the more experienced horses that would absolutely guide another horse through a situation like that.
So absolutely. Is there a limit where people say, no, we're going to take these horses out now, this is too dangerous? You know, I mean, clearly if there was firearms involved, I imagine, or whatever, but is there a limit, or is there, you have to see what horses you have available to them, how they're reacting, if they're coping, if they're getting stressed, etc. Is that right?
Well, absolutely, you're right. Firearms is not a place for horses. If there's firearms involved, that's it. Index for the horses. You're too vulnerable. The riders are up there, just, you know, falling plates is the expression that the army would use. So
what's it? What's the expression?
Falling plates. Falling plates just means you're very vulnerable to being shot.
Falling plates, yeah.
But in relation to general disorder, no. In fact, the horses probably won't even be deployed until it's got to that kind of point. The use of force to send horses cantering into a crowd that weigh 3/4 of a ton each at 20 miles an hour is a massive use of force. And so it's already got to be at fever pitch before that decision's made.
Well, let me stop you there. Let me just play a bit more footage then of a little montage I put together. I've got to remember to put the mute button. If there's someone's children anywhere near, and it's an F-bomb, not a C-bomb, but there is an F-bomb, couple of ones here. I'll try to mute them out just because I don't know who's listening and things. But we'll have a go with this one. But this is what's happening last night. See the horses time and time again, and then they pull back and then gain more ground. Really effective, fantastically effective, well organised, good strategy.
And they're going to stop tactics. Again.
And this guy who's narrating was eventually the one who got arrested for suspicion of being involved in a violent disorder last week. Hilarious. Now the dog's
this guy can control that dog. Are you serious?
I think he expects him to nicely next to him.
It's not like these dogs are in attack mode.
Now this is the skill, Dave, which they've been given a word, they gain the ground, gain the junction, and then see what happens with the dogs. Tactic achieved, gone. Fantastic.
So I'll let John comment about the horse side of it, and it'll be fairly similar, I'm sure. So I'm a dog commander, so as a dog commander, we'll be given an objective, probably something you see off in the distance, like that, and our objective will be to gain that ground. And as John will jump in and say now, the horses and dogs are probably the best tactic for gaining ground, and there's all sorts of reasons we'll want to gain ground, mostly public safety and that sort of thing, and crowd dispersal, but there is no better tactic than dogs and horses for gaining ground.
I was so impressed, and chuckling away. It was just brilliant. How many injuries? None that I could see. It's achieved, isn't it, John? So you would have been in very serious, similar situations to that. Do you feel exposed on top with these huge beasts either side of you, and you know, and they stutter around a little bit, don't they? And you get going,
and then you exposed until the Met gave me a nice white helmet for everyone to aim their missiles at. Oh look, the supervisor's got a white helmet on. Everybody aim their bricks at him.
That's great.
What you've seen there in that footage from a horse point of view is what is termed as an active push. Now, they can be done in 3 different speeds, if you like: walk, trot, and canter. Right. And it would depend very much on all of the circumstances, which of those 3 gaits, to use the terminology, you would use, which of those 3 paces that you would use. Generally speaking, the more serious the disorder, the faster the pace. Now, that dispersal, that active push, will be done with utter commitment. There'll be no intention to stop. When those horses are engaged in canter towards rioters, there isn't any intention to stop. The horses and the officers have a mindset to reach their objective. And that is where the power and strength in that tactic comes, because people will run away, and they do. As Dave's already mentioned, you then reach your designated line, and you'll signal to the foot duty behind you, who'll run through you, put the shields in front of you, gather your thoughts, and then move on to the next objective, and in which way you can take a whole street.
It was so quick, wasn't it? It was so quick and effective. How you achieved that as well.
I was involved in an active push outside Parliament in 2010. It was the night of the tuition fees vote in Parliament, and we were at the Victoria Street end by the Queen Elizabeth II conference centre, and in front of us was a foot duty shield unit from Barking and Dagenham. And they had been coming under sustained attack for some considerable time. I think half an hour plus, maybe even longer than that.
Just stop there, John. Just stop there for 1 second, because I think that's really important. Because you and I and Harry do this for a living, but for people that don't, we're talking about officers. Yes, they're wearing protective equipment, but it doesn't stop you from getting hurt. It doesn't stop you from, when a brick whacks you on the side of a helmet, potentially knocking you out. It doesn't stop your bones from getting broken if the the missile lands hard enough. And imagine being under that for half an hour. It's not nice. It's not a walk in the park. It's not a nice place to be. It's horrendous.
When you act that toxic little cocktail, the fact that you're in full protective gear with Kevlar plates, holding a shield, you're going to be thirsty, you're possibly going to be frightened, you're probably in a bit of pain as well, physical pain, as well as being hit. Of these particular guys, they'd managed to get hold of scaffolding, and they were being hit with scaffolding and sticks and other bits and pieces that the rioters had got hold of. Eventually, the decision was made to deploy the mounted branch in an active push. And we did, as you've seen on that clip there, but we did it in canter. So we cantered up behind the foot duty unit, who then split apart. So we went straight towards the crowd, and it achieved the objective of the crowd moving back onto Parliament Square. And we regained sort of several meters of ground. We were able to hold that line while the Barking and Dagenham PSU were relieved by a fresh serial of fresh officers that were then able to form up in front of us and hold that line while the Barking and Dagenham officers went off to refresh and tend to their wounds and have a drink, etc. The mounted serial at that point was attacked with paint bombs, and you'll get this police humour. We've just been attacked with scaffolding, bricks, there was flares thrown, and in fact on that particular day there was also a petrol bomb used, a Molotov cocktail, and there's two mounted officers covered in paint, like the gentleman on the picture there, and they're having a blazing row with one another about whether it's teal or duck egg.
I love it.
Which I think just absolutely sums it up. Yeah. But there was a little bit of an emotional moment.
Because I likened that to seeing for Afghanistan. You see some footage in Afghanistan when the A-10s come over, the tank busters, and the knackered, hot, scared infantry guys on the ground going, yeah, and it was you were describing it. It's that sort of feeling, and they actually wrote letters afterwards, didn't they?
Well, two things happened actually. Very shortly after we'd relieved these officers, we were redirected to Trafalgar Square. And because Whitehall was completely impassable, we rode through Horse Guards Parade, and we rode past the unit that we had relieved on Parliament Square. And they're all sort of having a drink, and some of them were getting bound up and tending to injuries, etc. And as they heard us coming, they lined the road of Horse Guards Parade, and they all cheered and clapped as we rode past, which was
incredible.
A great morale boost for us. But the chief inspector at the time, a few days later, shared with us a number of letters and emails that he'd received from the Barking and Dagenham PSU officers, thanking the mounted branch and sort of saying how relieved they were when the horses had arrived, and how thankful they were. And even one guy had even said, "I'm sure you saved our lives," because the level of sustained attack had been such that they were just at the end of their tether.
Absolutely amazing.
Just incredible. You did ceremonial. You did ceremonial as well, didn't you, John? So as in this picture here, I mean, I've seen this. I've probably seen you because I've been to London many years. And when I was on VIP jobs and we'd get a bit of an off time, there was usually something going on like this. So, yeah, I mean, what an honour, really. I bet you got quite close and comfortable, didn't you?
It is a great honour. And I mean, I'm a bit sad anyway, probably being ex-forces. I love a good military band. And this.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
I'm not, and I love one.
Getting paid to do something you love. The idea of ceremonial it's not a misnomer, but it's a bit misleading, because actually what the officers are doing on ceremonial duties is security work and crime reduction work. So when you see the mounted officers on the Trooping of the Colour, as that last picture you've shown there, those officers have a security role. They're not there to look pretty, which is just as well, because I never could.
Although you do.
There is actually a fully operational purpose behind all of their deployments, wherever they are, whether they're on the processional route or on static posts along the processional route. They've got very, very clear orders, instructions, and are fully briefed about what they're doing there. I shan't share all of those things for obvious reasons, but there's absolutely, they're not just there as a ceremonial item. They're there to police and provide security. One of the big advantages being, from horseback, is the elevated view. And this is also true of public order. Security point of view, you can see right into the parks, right into the crowd. When the blank firing starter pistol was fired at the Queen all those years ago, the preparation was done kind of 5 feet into the crowd before the man moved forward to the barriers. And you get that view from horseback. You can look right into the depths of the crowd and see any strange behaviours. And so that's really...
I remember doing Luton football. I can't remember who came up to help us. I think it might have been City horses. And again, Luton is quite narrow side streets on the way to the stadium. And their vantage point just gave them, such advanced warning of stuff happening that the dog vans could get to where they needed to get to stop people coming together and sort it. And it was just literally because they are 10 whatever feet above everybody else, they could see this bunch of people that had split off to run towards another bunch of people, and you know, just having that vantage point is incredible.
From an evidential point of view as well, it's vital. I dealt some years ago with a Congolese demonstration in Whitehall that had gone totally wrong. There were lots of officers injured, lots of damage caused. And my serial managed to corral, contain a group of about 150 violent demonstrators in the corner of Wellington Place, up near Piccadilly. And we held them there until a shield unit had arrived, and they had a controlled gate, and they were allowing people to leave the containment. And the mounted officer said, no, that one in the red top, he broke a window, or that one in the green top appeared to be directing people towards disorder. And we were able to use that elevated position, and we literally stood at the edge of the containment. And as people were released from the containment, we could identify the main offenders. So they were arrested as they came out of the containment.
Yeah.
Do you know if I take it they wear body cam now? Do you know if they wear cameras? It's a bit like mobile CCTV.
I tried using them when I was in, and the movement made them unpractical because you would have just got seasick because you're constantly moving. I believe now the technology's better, and
they're giving horses roller skates.
They're not wearing them. I think the technology's better, but not in my time, thankfully.
There's a couple of interesting questions that, I mean, I know the answer because I've got a few mounted mates, but you know, one is who deals with all the care of the horses? Is that down to you? Do you have shifts that are specific just to that? And the other one was, do you always have the same horse when you come in on duty? Do you take your horse home with us, like us poor dog handlers have to?
I can talk about the Metropolitan Police, and I've got a little knowledge of the TVP and Avon Somerset and things like that because we'd worked with them closely during the Olympics. Yeah. But in the Thames Valley Police, the individual officer is responsible for his or her horse. So the animal husbandry, the clipping of the horse, the grooming, the mucking out, everything. But each stable has also civilian grooms who are responsible for collective tasks like feeding the horses and stuff like that. That will be the civilian grooms, all the feeding regimes, the worming, all of those types of duties. But the actual day-to-day animal husbandry and care of the horses down to...
And we're back in the room. Okay?
Nope.
Yeah, you're back in, mate. Working. Yeah, I don't know what it was. Happens.
Okay. Did you hear what I said about the care of the horses?
Yes.
I heard everything.
So you get civilians as well that help with the feeding and things. We got to there.
Police constables are generally issued their horse. So they have that horse, they get to know that horse back to front, and that's their issued horse that they will keep for as long as they're both
proud
able.
Moment. Yeah.
Sergeants and above don't tend to have their own horses. One, because obviously there's a certain amount of administrative work that the sergeants need to do, and they can't be out on patrol every single day because they're doing sergeant-y stuff.
Well put, well described.
But also, depending on the nature of the job, will depend on the most appropriate horse for the supervisor, because clearly in a public order decision, in a public order situation, the supervisor needs to be making some quite serious decisions about where he or she's going to deploy their horses, what level of force to use, what justification they've got. So you need to have a good, sound horse. So remember earlier I talked about strong horses and weak horses, brave horses, not so brave. A supervisor needs to have a really brave horse because he or she needs to be able to think about the whole scenario and not just about riding that horse. So it's almost like it has to be so good that it's got to be a working platform.
Yeah.
And also with ceremonial, there's certain colours that are important. So in central London, the treatment of the colour, for example. Bay horses mean one thing.
Yeah.
A black horse will mean another thing. A grey horse will mean another thing, depending on the nature of the ceremony.
Right.
So state occasions, for example, like the state opening of Parliament, grey horses have a significance because they will perform the front and the rear escorts for the whole procession, but they must be grey.
I love it. There's so much tradition, isn't there, in the horse world, and I love it. I love it all.
The horses that escort the regalia, the crown jewels, they have to be bay horses. So
what's a bay horse? What's bay horses?
Brown, I guess, would be the closest.
Oh, okay.
You might say. Yeah. But
okay.
Yeah,
What do you you know, you said, I spoke to you earlier and you said about naming your horses and people ask what names they are.
Yeah, that's just a little bit of fun, I'm afraid. All the police horses have names, and their name actually starts with the letter of their intake. So, for example, all the horses that begin with A have all joined at the same time. Either that or they're really old and they've gone through a full alphabet. All the horses whose names start with B will have joined at the same time. But they're also issued a number. So all the horses have a number. So just for a little bit of fun, really, sometimes if people would ask me what my horse's name was, I'd just tell them what the number was. I'd say, well, it's number 35 or it's number 96. And you could see it like a little hurt come across the face. What do you mean? Well, what's his name? Well, no, it's got an issued number. It's 35. That's who he is. And we just run that for a little while, and then kind of tell them.
It does, and that reminds me of when I was at headquarters, and you've got the firing range in the background, and you know, and I've just taken them and shown them the dog unit and seen, you know, great people like Alan Knight, if you're listening, which you won't be, but top people, you know, and they're really impressed, and they go, oh, what happens when the dogs retire? And they go, oh, well, we hand them over to the firearms unit. And they're like, they go, ah. And I was like, and then you just sort of, don't be so silly, but they believe it for a little bit. And it's that thing that they just, you know, well, it's human, and you get these relationships, and that's the best way, isn't it? Dave, for example, your dogs, that relationship between, you cannot treat them like a number. You've got to get to know their soul, and vice versa, as well, haven't you? Really?
For me, yeah. I mean, for me to have a rewarding career and deployment with my dog, then absolutely, I've got to know their ins and outs. I've got to know their strong points. The same as John with his horses. You got to know. Pick your battles, if you like, you know, how to help a dog through something until it's seen it a few times, and then you can come back the next time and work better at it. And you know, you build and grow together. And then unfortunately they then retire and you have to start all over again. We're in serious threat of running out of time here, John, because I think we could talk all night about this, and we've got loads of questions coming in and people are absolutely loving it. We might actually have to have you back on, if I'm honest. People are absolutely loving it. But I know you've moved on, you've retired from the Met, but now you're still with the horses. So, and I think you potentially still come in contact with retired police horses, which is a question that keep coming up on the feed at the moment. What happens to... So there's two things I want to ask. What happens when they retire? But first of all, I want to ask the question that I always get asked. Should we be using animals to do our dirty work, if you like? Should we be using them in policing like we saw last night? We've discussed the fluffier side, which you and I both get involved in our day jobs with our animals. But should we be using them when it all goes a bit hairy? And then what happens to them in retirement?
Well, in relation to your first question, obviously, I mean, perhaps unsurprising, my answer, yes, absolutely. They are entirely appropriate. You know, from the dogs, their standard of care is par excellence. It's second to none. I mean, these animals that work for the Metropolitan Police, they are really they're in 5-star accommodation. You know, their care is way in excess of most civilian horses.
Yeah.
You know, if they get a bit of a temperature, oh, quick, get the vet. You know, everybody's all over it. So they have a massive, their welfare is of absolute primary importance. Fortunately, injuries to the horses are extremely rare. I mean, they really are rare enough that it's really quite shocking if a horse gets injured, and it's generally something fairly minor. They're very robust animals, and when they go into public order situations, all of their vulnerable areas are completely armored and protected. So it's so rare, and the flanks of the horses, the big fleshy parts that aren't armored and aren't protected, I mean, they are so resilient that they just, fortunately, touch wood, hope it doesn't change, but certainly the animals getting hurt is so rare, and definitely not to such a degree that it should ever compromise their use, because they are so useful and so good at what they do. For the good parts as well, you know, we talked earlier about the neighbourhood engagement. Public order's a small bit of what we do. In relation to retirement, yes, I couldn't have, you know, I've landed on my feet. What can I say? I work for the Horse Trust now as their estate foreman. This is the world's oldest horse charity. And one of their primary functions is to provide respite, but also retirement care for retired working horses. So not just the police, that's for the army as well. Horses that have worked for certain charities like the Riding for the Disabled Association. We've even had a Shetland pony that worked at Battersea Children's Petting Zoo for years. So these animals that have provided a public service, they haven't been privately owned. They've provided some kind of service to the greater public. And there's a number of ex-Met horses there and from other mounted divisions. One guy in particular, the big, lovely grey horse that you showed a picture of earlier, called Gawain. He's with the Horse Trust now.
Picture here is this one.
Oh no, the one with just the head that you showed.
Just the head. Yeah.
On.
Okay.
Yeah. That's him in retirement. Actually, that was when he got retired. So, and just being able to keep contact with these animals and see them live. There he is, Gawain. Just to be able to see them living as nature intended them to live. They don't get ridden. They live out in their herds. Obviously,
are they used as studs?
Sorry?
Are they used as studs? Like a stud farm then? Or
No. The police wouldn't take a stallion. They would just be too difficult to train appropriately. The police only use geldings, so they won't use an entire horse. It would just be problematic beyond belief. And the mares, by the time they reach retirement, would be too old to go into stuff. But they get retired. That's it. They're done. They're out in the field, and if they come to the Horse Trust.
Feels a bit like me, Dave. Really. I'm just stuck in a field and there's no mares around here either. You do other things though as well, don't you? About rescue, helping with rescue training.
Part of the Horse Trust, I mean, is a lot of it's education, science. Well, there's welfare issues as well. 25% of the animals there have been rescued, so it's not just retired horses. 25% are rescue horses that we bring back to health. And hopefully, long term, we hope that they'll be able to be healthy enough to be able to be rehomed on, you know, in a controlled way to an appropriate person. But one of the parts of the organisation is a sub-organisation called BARTA, which is the British Animal Trauma and Rescue Association. And although it's part of the Horse Trust, it's cross-species. So they do have some dealings with dogs and things like that. And their primary function is, again, education, and also to promote the very best practice through experience and also into research in rescuing animals. And these could be anything from a horse box that's turned over on a motorway that's got animals in, to a horse that's got stuck in a stable, or a cow that's upside down in a ditch, or a stray dog running down the middle of the M25. And Barter, the guy that heads it up is called Jim Green, whose experiences in fire and rescue. And we train fire and rescue, local authorities, highways agency, traffic cops, ordinary neighbourhood policemen, how to handle animals safely, how best to deal with them in traumatic situations, their behaviours. And we also provide what we call vet packs. Yep. So they have emergency packs, so a vet can arrive on the scene. Some fire and rescues use pager systems. They can arrive on the scene. They've got everything there they need for emergency first aid, just like an ambulance would have for a human. Everything they need for that first golden hour of that animal rescue.
Wow. Did you see, I think it was the BLM march, the horse, I think it was the same day or the day before the horse bolted, which we can discuss in a minute, which eventually ended up back at Great Scotland Yard stables of its own volition, which is an interesting question, because did it smell the familiar scent, although it wasn't from those stables, and just head back there, or was it by accident? But there was a picture of a horse that had fallen between two cars. Now, lots of people were saying it had been run over, but it hadn't. Apparently, it just got a little bit spooked and jumped sideways and ended up on its side. But isn't it? Someone was saying to me that that's not uncommon. We just leave them. We let them get their thoughts together. We let them gather themselves back up, and then eventually we can help them back up again. But have you ever been kicked off by your horse, or lost your seat?
Oh, I've yes, is the answer to that. In fact, I've broken a couple of bones over the years with horses. There is a risk element involved to the rider and a little bit to the horse. But as I've said earlier, it's thankfully really unusual for a horse to get injured. I think, are you talking about the horse that had the bicycle thrown at it?
No, it was. I'm sure it was the same incident. I'll find you the picture and show you, John.
It's not that common for horses to fall over.
It looked like there was a row of parked cars, didn't it?
Yeah.
And in between the parked cars, there was a horse, and at first sight, it looked horrendous. You think, oh my God, what's happened to it? And it was very much sort of, it fell over sort of thing. It'll be picked up and it's fine. There was hardly any injuries sort of thing.
What can sometimes happen is obviously they wear shoes, and on certain surfaces they may slide, and they might lose their footing if they've slid over their feet. But as you've already identified, generally they'll get up, shake themselves off, and they'll be absolutely fine. I mean, I can only think of one really serious injury to a horse, and that was even before my service in the mounted branch. That was a horse called Alamein. In fact, again, you've shown a picture of Alamein where I'm bending down talking to a superintendent. Alamein had a thunder flash ignited under his sheath, which is Willie, in a Millwall Birmingham City FA Cup final, and he obviously reacted, and there's Alamein, and he now works for an animal charity in Leeds, looking after children that are suffering post-traumatic stress from sexual assaults. That's why he went on retirement. So Alamein was taken. He went through a car windscreen and severed some quite major blood vessels, and he was taken with a traffic escort to Newbury.
Yeah.
No, not Newbury. Can't remember exactly where he went. But Newmarket. I don't know what Newbury. It's because we were talking about the protests at Newbury Bypass earlier. He went to Newmarket, and he was given a blood transfusion.
Oh wow!
And he was able to return to duty eventually, and he was an absolutely fantastic policeman.
Brilliant.
Brave as a lion, right the way to the day he retired. And then I said, in retirement, he now works for a charity in Leeds, and he's used as a therapy horse for children. And I believe they do some soldiers as well that have got combat stress.
Wow.
And he's not ridden. He has the life of Riley. So a well-deserved retirement, and still providing a service to the public.
Absolutely phenomenal. Well, I hope what comes out of this for anybody who's listening, who's never worked an animal in this sort of situation, or never worked an animal, you know, the care for these animals, as John said, for the horses and for the dogs. You know, I've been to Great Scotland Yard stables and a couple of other stables around the country, and they're second to none. They're incredible. There's a massive team. The food is exemplary. The dogs, when they come home, they're part of the family, and the care that goes into them and the thought that goes or should go into their training it is absolutely incredible. And we do our best to keep on top, and follow the scientists and listen to the scientists when they say you should train this way and you should train that way. And they love what they do. Yes, they deserve their retirement when it comes, and most of them adjust perfectly to a wonderful retirement, as John's just described with the horses. They're allowed to go and be a herd again and relax and never have to think about going out on patrol. Having said that, I believe the horses down at the stables in London do get regular stints out in the country to go and chill out and relax. That's right, isn't it, John?
Yeah, they do. They try and get, I think, 2 weeks respite now. Obviously, I've been out for a number of years now. 2 weeks respite a year, but also they will do annual training once a year, which is 2 weeks, with their designated rider, where they'll go to Invercourt, the mounted training establishment, and they'll work for a couple of hours a day, and then they're allowed out in the field, and it's a bit of relaxed time. One of the things they do, though, interestingly, is they jump street furniture. So like with the riots, when people throw out riot barriers and park benches and they throw things, well, actually the police horses once a year will jump a show jumping course made up of weird stuff, things like park benches and things like that. Yeah. So eventually, if they come across those in action, as it were, they're familiar with seeing them and they won't be totally taken by surprise. Certainly during the poll tax riots, a colleague was unhorsed, quite seriously injured. His horse had to be taken back to a safe place. So one rider was riding one horse, holding his horse, going across Trafalgar Square, got attacked by rioters and had to jump both horses across the riot barrier.
Oh my God.
The other one he was holding jumped over a riot barrier in order to get away to a safe location.
He shouted "Yeehaw" whilst he did it, just for extra.
I'm sure he shouted something. I'm not sure I'm going to drop that bomb. He gave a warning the last time that bomb came. I'm sure he said something.
But
John, I think we've got to have you back on, John, because we've barely scratched the surface, and I'm sure you've got a ton of stories as well. I think, from the amount of comments we've had, I think the timing couldn't have been any better with what's happened down in London and in Bristol. But I found it fascinating, and I know quite a few people in the mounted branch. So thank you.
There is some more information, certainly about the retirement side of it, on the Horse Trust website, and also Barter have their own website. So it's just literally the Horse Trust. It's based in Speed in Buckinghamshire, and Barter, BARTA, and there's a lot of information on there about retirement, rescues, etc.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. We're out of time, everyone. That flew by, didn't it?
I knew it would happen.
John, for your information, our live figures have stayed higher than normal. Okay, so we stay about 130. Sometimes they go dip down to about 100. So for that, I know is phenomenally good. Over the next 3 days or so, it gets to over 10,000 views through Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, that side of things. So fantastic. There's a lot of good information that's out there to just educate people of what happens in protests and all that sort of thing. Really
good. Helped to answer some people's questions and to sort of allay their fears about what they've seen on the TV and on the internet over the last few months. I think you're going to see more of it, unfortunately, this summer. We kind of expected it to happen last summer, but it looks like it's going to happen this summer. And all of us will do our best to make sure we all come home and our animals come home as safely as can possibly be. Someone did ask what happens when it goes seriously wrong. About the dogs and the horses are withdrawn. They really are. It's if it's missiles and stuff like that are not really a place for a dog to be. So glass and stuff like that. So there lots of thought goes into this. We don't just chuck them in willy-nilly without thinking about their safety. So, John, we got to have you back.
We'll chuck Dave in for that. Just Dave.
Yeah.
We'll leave.
I better go and check my phone. I'm going to have loads of texts saying, you never mentioned this, you never mentioned that.
Yeah, we do. Well, your caveat for that is you're invited back, so we'll have you back again. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. John, you've been an absolute star. Dave, it's lovely to see you. If you'd like to just hang on for 5 minutes after the credits and things, John, and we'll say a final word. But goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much. Cheers, all.
Thanks.